1869. A phantom train returned to claim the night. By 1869, the rails through Virginia ran smooth again, spiked tight over new ties, the scar tissue of a country hammered into straight lines. Telegraph needles chattered from depot to depot. Wheat lifted where trenches had been. Red clay bled in rain where the embankments cut old battlefields to the bone. Men who had worn gray or blue now wore canvas, swung lanterns, and spoke in mileposts. Station ledgers forgot the words troop and hospital and learned to love timber, tobacco, and livestock like a prayer answered in freight. The Richmond line breathed on a schedule so exact it could measure a conscience. On fog nights, the world narrowed to lamp and whistle. The midnight freight from Aquia shouldered south on Tuesdays and Fridays. Its headlamp drilled a tunnel in the white, and its whistle stitched the darkness into something that could be heard. Yet some nights, another whistle rode beside it. Older, a quarter tone off, as if a memory were clearing its throat. The Milford telegrapher, a veteran who kept 2 watches for reasons he did not discuss, wrote a single private word in the margin of his book. Unaccounted. Stories travel faster than freight. Section men spiking a siding at Devil's Hollow spoke of a wartime extra that had never reached Richmond in '64, boxed in powder and wounded men, ruddered by orders written hotter than the rails. The official book for that quarter was thin where it should be fat. The superintendent's notes skipped like a record scarred by heat. They said the pines along the curve grew blacker, and if you tapped the ties there, they sounded hollow, like doors between rooms no one had lived in. When the fog sank low and the frogs fell silent, the rails themselves seemed to hum with a tone no instrument could tune. A night watchman crossed himself out of habit. He thought he had forgotten, and stared along the line until both watches lost 3 minutes and then, impolitely, agreed again. The older men could name the month without lifting a ledger, May 1864, when the wilderness burned and the wounded spilled through farmhouses like floodwater. The railroad ran extras day and night, orders flying down the wire in clipped commands. Priority, ammunition, hospital, clear main. Somewhere after Doswell, a night train took the points wrong, or the points took the train, or a lamp was misread under a sky lit by pine fire. Accounts disagree the way memory bargains with mercy, but every version bends to the same curve above Devil's Hollow. The consist was a priest's bad dream, powder, fixed cartridges, crates of percussion caps that rattled like seed. Also men whose bandages had dried into boards, surgeons with wooden hands, a chaplain with a voice rubbed to thread. The tender hopped the iron and the first boxcar bit the ties. Sparks blew back in a bright wind. Witnesses swore the forest sighed before it flamed, as if pine were a choir that knew its part too well. Caps popped like hail. A wagon of ether burst with a sweet breath no one could enjoy. Canvas burned with the silence peculiar to canvas when there is nothing left to protect. At dawn, soldiers drew a cordon, and the company drew a curtain. Ammunition cooked, bodies burned together in the names of opposing columns. The embankment looked away. A crew relayed the track without mourning because mourning owns no column on a work order. An officer wrote, "Disaster contained." A superintendent wrote, "Traffic restored 2:17 p.m." The chaplain took his hat off to a cinder pile and put it back onto the timetable. There were no stones, only slag, no graves, only the line made level again. Afterward, the cut kept cool in summer and warm in winter. Frogs ceased there at the wrong hour. A black dog sat sometimes at the milepost and watched the rail the way men watch sail for home. The ledger for that week stays neat and shy. The loss remains a smell that rises from the ditch when the rain is warm. "5 years on, the needle at Milford twitched to a bell code no schedule owned. 'Approach,' it said in 2 clean beats, and the telegrapher, who had learned to trust machines more than men, stepped to the door to see a headlamp that was not there. Farther down the line, the crossing at Jericho tripped itself. Gates lowered, red lamps bled into fog, and the watchman stood with his flag raised to nothing as the rails sang a key he could feel under his boots. In the depot at Guinea, a clerk set out the mailbags because a whistle had told his bones it was time, then felt foolish and put them back. Telegraph tape recorded the passage as neatly as if a conductor had punched it. The section boss chalked Phantom small on a slate and rubbed it nearly away before anyone could make sport of it. Livestock shied from the fence as if a draft had moved before them. Dogs bristled and then remembered themselves. A sow farrowed early to a rhythm the night had set. Lantern glass filmed as if with breath. The 2 watchers on the veterans' vest lost time again and reconciled, impolite and precise. Once, at the curve above Devil's Hollow, the air of a summer noon turned cool enough to make a man's teeth ache. The weeds along the ballast leaned as if a coach had brushed them. Someone swore he heard iron shoes on iron steps, and he had not imagined that sound since the night his regiment boarded for the peninsula. The company inspector arrived with calipers, composed his face into geometry, and wrote a sane report about thermal gradients and tropospheric tricks on sound. He locked it in a file where every page smelled faintly of pine smoke, which no sane report can remove. The first time the town agreed on a date was the 5th of May, the wreck's own ghost of a birthday. Fog lay in Devil's Hollow like milk. Cicadas sawed themselves quiet. Veterans drifted to the embankment without planning it. A boy carried a lantern because boys do that. A woman brought a folded flag because women know the scale of grief. When the telegraph at Milford spat 2 clean beats and a pause, every head turned as if called by name. The headlamp arrived as an absence of dark, a narrowing of the fog into a tunnel, then panes of yellow where windows should be, lanterns swinging without hands. Between those panes, silhouettes sat as soldiers sit when they have become freight. Heads heavy, hats enlapped, the alive and the almost alive and the not alive at all occupying the same seat because a train is generous when it must be. A hard smell of soot and medicine moved over the ditch. A breeze of warmth against a cool night proved motion where sight insisted on none. The line hummed in a key that loosened tears. The woman with the flag stepped back because she had learned to do that for trains and for grief. The boy raised his lantern and lowered it because signals have rules. A corporal who had never mastered prayer saluted instead, and that worked as well as anything. The return whistle did not sound. The night kept its own answer. When the last lantern passed, a red lamp bobbed where a brakeman should have been. Moss stirred, but no heel-scuffed cinder. The veterans counted cars by habit and could not agree on a number, a small proof that history runs longer the second time. By dawn, the fog lay ordinary again. Where the rail had sung a little frost, traced the fish plates, then melted like a word you cannot remember when someone asks. The railroad hated a story it couldn't invoice. They sent an inspector with calipers and a polite smile, an army engineer with a limp and an angrier one behind his eyes, and 2 linemen who could fix anything made of wire. They measured gauge and super elevation, peered into culverts, weighed ballast in their palms as if gravel confessed. The engineer ran a level across the curve at Devil's Hollow and nodded that it was true as morals ever are. Then the telegraph bell tapped, "Approach," neat as a schoolmaster, and everyone present turned their heads like puppets built by the same hand. "Atmospherics," said the inspector to the notebook, and wrote a paragraph about gradients that would read as competent in any office, warmed by coal. The colonel, who had burned a bridge in '64 to stop a train not unlike the one they were failing to see, said nothing. He walked the right-of-way with his palm a handspan above the rail until his skin found a river of cold that did not belong to the hour. He set a watch on the tie, glass up, and watched the second hand stumble as if men were boarding again. That evening in the depot, they tried traps, mirror plates to catch a light that wouldn't be born, a wet sheet hung to print steam that wouldn't condense, a photographer with plates the color of bruises who begged the night to leave a fingerprint. The telegraph sang 2 beats and a pause. The sight stirred with no wind. The plate came out fogged and scratched with a streak that might be a lamp or a wish. The company filed the expense coolly under security. The colonel folded the fogged plate into a handkerchief the way a man pockets a medal given for a duty that keeps arriving. Once you admit a timetable for a ghost, you set tables for it too. On the next 5th of May, the church sent a brass band to the embankment and then thought better of the trumpets and kept the drums. Women brought coffee that steamed like forgiveness. Men who had argued slavery now argued shutter speeds. Children who sensed ceremony the way iron senses magnet lined themselves along the ditch and waited with a discipline no Sunday had secured. Names were read from both armies because the train had not taken sides when it burned. A chaplain from town, Methodist, plain, spoke briefly and did not ask for silence because silence was arriving anyway. When the bell at Milford tapped "Approach," the bandmaster raised his sticks and then lowered them. No music is bravest when it declines to play. A breeze came upstream as from motion. Lamps budded in the fog, exactly the right height for windows. The rails thrummed in the wrist. The town watched its own breath make ghosts of itself and envied air for the ease. Someone had brought a new photographic plate and a better resolve. The shutter clicked. The plate later showed what plates show: the guilt of chance, a smear of light like a carriage window, and, near the red tail that no brakeman carried, a white blur that could be hat or hope. The station clock haltingly surrendered 2 minutes that it took back slow, like a dog uncertain whether a hand means kindness. When the last lamp passed, the chaplain lowered his head. The band tapped once on a drum that could not help itself. People exhaled into the ordinary night and found the coffee still warm. In the ledger at Milford, the telegrapher wrote, "May 5th, special passed, no consist given." A joke he did not share because it was not a joke at all. Years shaved the legend into something people could say without blushing. The company straight-lined the curve, laid heavier rail, planted the right-of-way in stone like a vow against superstition. The telegraph gave way to telephone, then to wires that carry more voices than a war can make. The cut at Devil's Hollow softened at the edges, pines shouldered in, and the ditch learned again how to cradle frogs. Yet on certain nights, the old bell code visits the new wires, like a tune hummed by a house that remembers its former tenants. A museum in Fredericksburg keeps a fogged plate and a ledger open to the week when disaster contained and traffic restored 2:17 p.m. Learn to share a page. A child presses his nose to the glass and leaves a print. A veteran wipes it away with the sleeve he saved for funerals. Down the road, a depot clock with a nervous second hand insists on honesty in small ways and lies about nothing larger than weather. In a drawer, the telegrapher's second watch sleeps. When wound, it still loses 3 minutes at midnight on the 5th. Precise as grief. The line runs on because lines do, and freight still shoulders past the embankment with the patience of work. But on fog nights, the air in Devil's Hollow cools a little, and the rails learn a note no instrument owns. Lamp height lights bud in the mist, hold and pass. A red tail bobs where a brakeman is not. No speeches, no drums. The town, smaller now, takes coffee to the ditch without announcing its intention. The chaplain's granddaughter declines to pray because prayer would make it less true. The train that never reached Richmond continues toward it in a corridor left in the world for precisely that purpose. Schedules do what they can. The night handles the rest.